Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Kellner from California Education Partners, and I'm here with Dr. Joe Hernandez, Superintendent of Dinuba Unified School District in Dinuba, California. Joe, thank you so much for taking the time today. I know we're going to talk a little bit about labor management relations, and even though these are challenging times, how we can work to strengthen those bonds and those pieces of communication. So I know that the relationships you've cultivated in Dinuba didn't happen overnight. So can you talk to us a little bit about how you went about that?
Sure, you're right. It did not happen overnight. We're in our labor management relations about 5-6 years ago now, and I'm so glad that we did. And so we've been on this journey of really working collaboratively with our teachers and with our classified staff. I would say definitely we're further along with our teachers and classified staff because the leadership changes quite often in classified ranks, more so than in certificated ranks. And so you have to stop and build those relationships and then move forward. So you take a step back once in a while with that. Yeah, and our story goes back to the point of which back in 2014, in fact, we have the article where historically there had been just very fierce teacher administration battles, probably since the year 2000 to 2014. There had been just a very contentious, very toxic, very adversarial relationship. And it resulted in just a lot of bad feelings, a lot of turnover in superintendents, just a lot of fighting. And that kind of spread through the community, to our board. And there was just a culture of distrust. And so, which ultimately, back in 2014, there was actually a board meeting, and it was contrived. And the teachers union leader at that time came to the board and said, hey, we took a vote of confidence on Dr. Hernandez, and he got a vote of no confidence with the teachers. And presented that to the board, along with my assistant superintendent. And the board said, you know what? No, we're not gonna ask for his resignation. He's doing exactly what we want him to do. In fact, what we want you to do is to sit down with them and figure this out. And so what transpired after that was basically the teachers union leadership literally imploded, and they were thrown out because they had withheld information critical to the solving of a contractual issue. By withholding that information, they wanted the turmoil to continue. When teachers found out about that, they got infuriated and they kicked them out. So in started, with new leaders. And as the board had suggested, they sat down and we worked in collaboration with one another. Started out with just a breakfast. The big deal, though, was we actually took a trip to San Diego together in the same van. So about a 6-hour trip. Okay, by the way, we give that as a prescription now. We really do. We go, you need to spend time together because that's going to be the most important thing that you're going to do in working collaboratively. So we went to San Diego to a labor conference, and we actually discovered that we actually liked one another and we had a lot in common. And so now we actually present at Labor Management Initiative conferences together, the teachers along with classified, and we tell our story to districts around the state and nation now about how to get started and why. And the big thing was really interesting. It's the reason we're in education, and it really is to make a difference. So what they stated they wanted was to improve the quality of education in their community. And I said, well, we believe in the same things. So why are we fighting with one another? I didn't like the union president. He didn't like me, but we didn't know each other. Right. So move the clock forward a few years, and at one of the presentations, I didn't know he was going to do this. he presents me and he says, "This is my friend, Dr. Hernandez." So the same guy that asked for my head now calls me his friend. And it's a great, we have a great relationship. We now understand that we want the same things, and we also understand we have to work together to accomplish them. And working together produces a synergy which is immense.
Absolutely.
And so basically, I want to move it forward to this time. So
Right.
to this time, actually, I can't imagine being in a district right now that's not working together right now. If there's a time to come together and to huddle up and to figure this out, it's now. And so we've had the good fortune of being, with our collaborative relationship, to come together with our union leaders and teacher leaders, and working together with me and my admin team. We've done some extensive planning. We've been able to deal with this emergency, and as you know, it happened from one day to the next. Literally, it was just literally, we're going to close the schools, and then we're going to figure this out. And so we've been doing that. In fact, I don't know if I sent you, Steve. One of the things that we're doing, we're meeting virtually every couple of weeks, and we're putting out an update to all teachers and the district regarding our work. And the communication is joint. It's from me and from the union leadership, so that when anyone reads it, say, "Oh, they've been working together." Exactly the message you want to communicate. Yes, we have been working together, and we're messaging together.
And how often does that message come out from both of you?
You know what? We're on message number 4. So we've done it every 2 weeks at least.
Okay.
Yeah. In terms of how our instruction is going, how distance learning is going, those kinds of things. How are our kids responding, and then kind of a new twist as we're working our way through this just here recently. So, and Vicky, and Vicky's the right person for all this. So we discussed, okay, we're learning lots about what's going on and, and the future. But one of the things is this thing is tragic in so many ways because of the illnesses and so on. But in another way, it's an opportunity. It's an opportunity to learn about how we need to address distance learning or online learning for the future. So amidst all this, and amidst all of our adjustments and so forth, Vicki is going to be heading up a innovation task force, and what we need to be doing, and she's doing it together with teachers. This is why I'm mentioning this. Mm-hmm. She's taking a core group of about 6 or 7 people, and their job is to research what some of the trends and where we might go from here. So it isn't about just trying to maintain, it's about moving forward, reading most current cutting edge research. We want to be ahead of the curve with this. So what have we learned, and then what can we apply from research? And she's creating a small think tank, and you nod your head, you know how smart she is. and really her power is in bringing people and minds together. Yeah. So we're going to use the local minds first, and then reach out to some innovators, and she may be calling you and so on. So, but we're going to start with a small group. Yep. The thing is, it's made up about 2 admin, a couple principals, and about maybe 4 or 5 teachers. So together, we're going to be looking at the future and what the implications are for the future, and how Dinuba Unified needs to adapt to that future to be successful.
So that's amazing. So in addition to the work around content, that obviously is an example of the relationships that you guys have built, are there some other examples that have sort of bubbled up during this time that show you that there is a trust between teachers and administration?
Yes. Now let me cite those, but let me go back and cite like when Vicky's bringing together teachers in this work that I just talked about. What's really interesting is that what happens is when you're working together on this joint project, the end of it is we need to really plan for the future and think ahead.
Yeah.
But some of the interest that we're getting, what we're building trust in the process, because we're coming alongside each other building this bridge, right? And so one of the great outcomes of that is that our collaboration gets tighter.
Yeah.
And then if you really think through it, because teachers are having a voice in the research and in this whole conversation, then you have the buy-in. It isn't, we have a great idea, we want you guys to do this, right?
Yeah, no.
Yeah, we'll teach you, but we want you to do this. No, is we're going to discover it together and we'll figure out how to put it into place. So so obviously, as I said, we come together every 2 weeks, and we're putting out joint communication. There's work right now with one of the areas, and we talked about this with Laura and in the group earlier. Okay, so just from a practical perspective, how do we put through a graduation this year?
Mm-hmm.
How do we do that? And so,
yep.
So now, and again, working collaboratively with teachers, just like the stadium idea, the creativity just starts bubbling up. And I think the real power of collaboration for me is I think I use the word synergy, and that would be accurate. But I think what also happens is it just creates a momentum that whatever the obstacle it is, that working together, to acknowledge that working together is going to produce a great outcome. And what was I before I became a superintendent, a teacher? So we all have that base that we can draw from. We all were educators. Vicki was a teacher, and all of our admin team were teachers. We were all there before, so we know the issue is really to understand we are who we are, but we're in this together, and we need everyone's best thinking, whether they're a teacher or admin or whomever they are. We can come together, and we've set the framework. The valuable piece about this is those relationships were already established. Now they're just growing into another level. So now, for me, this model is adaptable no matter what the issue is. Coming together of people is what's going to solve it through teamwork and through having a mutually desirable goal and so on. So so that's another example is a graduation. Now we know that we've got to make plan A, plan B, plan B, plan C, and plan D, which we have, and teachers are ultimately involved with that think tank of ideas and possibilities, whether we actually have an in-person graduation or not. And right now we have, all the kids want a postponed graduation. They want that, but there are limits to that. But if not, we're going to have a virtual one. And of course, teachers will be very much involved in that process of a virtual graduation. We got a teacher techie who's going to, I think, do the work, the filming work, and then we'll have the coordination done by teachers and so forth. So that's one aspect of it. Another aspect of it is right now, and this is a classic example. This thing caught everybody so off guard, and one of the areas that's going to come up is personnel. So when we hear, we really don't know what's going to happen, but it's not going to be necessarily good from a financial perspective. We know that our budgets are going to be really hurting, and so we have to have maximum flexibility with personnel.
Right.
So that may mean that we may have to have different class sizes, for example. We may have to have different flexibilities, and so we're bringing along our leadership to say, okay, here are some of the things that we may have to take a look at. We may not be able to replace X person. We may not, those kinds of things, and they fully understand that. Even before this, we had signed a 2-year agreement because we didn't want to get caught up in negotiations every year, right? And that frees you to do other work. And now we're really glad that we have a year where we don't have to have negotiations. We're going to include them in the budget meetings we get. We're going to come together. I want you to hear, and we have for the last several years, I want you to hear what I'm going to hear.
Mm-hmm.
The impact that it's going to have on education and so on. One of the things, another example of what happened, this was in a collaboration sense, because we cut off in mid-March, for example, we had all kinds of stipends that were not completed. So,
oh, sure, right.
Athletic stipends, academic stipends, mentoring stipends, the whole thing just stopped. And so, through conversations, it was, said, you know what, we need to hold people harmless. We had that budgeted. We have the money now. And so as an act of good faith, we're gonna pay up those stipends, even though teachers were not able to complete them as a matter of good faith. And that's those kinds of things matter. They are important.
Yeah.
Yes, education, we're lucky that, we're keeping our pay, but some of the other things are also important as well, as you well know. And so with an understanding that in the future we may have to cut back on some of those things because of budget restrictions. Just kind of a side note, we have a reserve at about 19-20%, which is not bad. It's not a bad reserve to have. And now, particularly the leadership is saying, Joe, you've given a classic case as to why we need to have a healthy reserve.
Yeah.
Before we'd say, oh no, you're hiding, you're cheating. No. Now we're grateful that we have something to fall back on. And we know other districts around us that were already laying off before this hit.
Right.
So we're in a pretty good place, all things considered. And a big part of that is just communicating with our teachers.
Well, Joe, I can't thank you enough for sharing your story and your message as a bit of a roadmap for folks who are looking. In closing, if there was a superintendent or union leader who's watching this and wanted to pick one place to start, other than locking themselves in a van for 6 hours, what would you say would be a good place to start this trust building, to start that relationship?
Yeah, I think there's no blueprint for this, but I think there are some things that we could say that might be more effective. One is to definitely start, because and take small steps. So a small step might be, let's meet for breakfast, and we're not going to have an agenda other than let's just talk. We're going to get to know one another. So paper agendas are not really good. It's simply, really getting to know one another, and through time that builds a relationship, and you get to know each other's hearts. And what that does over time is that any preconceived notions, stereotypes, beliefs about the other person, who they might be, will absolutely disappear. But it takes time. So whether it's a van ride, whether it's a weekly breakfast, it's important that leadership, and not just the superintendent, but admin, and I'm talking about principals and site leaders. And now, by the way, Steve, we actually fund. I found out that might have been a problem. Principals and union leaders, gave them a couple $100 so that they can go have breakfast and coffee when you could.
Yep.
To meet, and I said, hey, just to meet and build a relationship. I'm not asking you to solve it. You're gonna be solving issues together, but just to meet. And I don't want a couple bucks here and there to be an impediment. And it could be on site, could be off site.
Right.
That gets things moving. And once you build that relationship, it is really about building trust. Without trust, you don't have anything. And now we have an immeasurable amount of trust, and then is to maintain that communication throughout your district. And the neat thing about this is, and we have shown it, in our data shows it, the more we have, the stronger the collaboration between teachers and admin, the greater your student achievement. Because the energy that we were using, if you think about this, the energy we were using to fight one another, and we did, can now be used creatively to see how we can enhance student learning together. And that is a message that Taft Unified, not Unified, Taft High School District shared with us. They said, look, you know, we were fighting each other, and the minute we stopped fighting and started advocating for our kids together, then we figured out that we needed to put our arms aside and work for the kids. And that's what it's about, is to keep focused on what our work is, who we're serving. And once we get that straight, a lot of good things happen.
Well, that's a perfect sentiment to leave it on. Joe, thank you again for your time. I really appreciate you sharing this.